Hello and welcome to the Eleemosynary Moment. My name is Brad Hathcock. Running late is Aaron Spears, but he will be on. He's having some computer problems, so he told me to go ahead and get started. And you know how that typically goes. So we are really just going to jump into it. Everybody knows I like to read articles. So, one thing that Forbes put out here is an article about COVID vaccines. Yes, one of the things that will likely get us kicked off of YouTube. We're going to go ahead and start with that. So, this article came out on Forbes, and its title is COVID Vaccines Linked to a Small Increase in Heart and Brain Disorders Study Finds. But they give a caveat that the risk from infection is far higher. So, researchers from the Global Vaccine Data Network, which is a research arm of the World Health Organization, looked at the expected versus observed rates of 13 different medical conditions that were considered adverse events of special interest, they say. So this study was done with a population of 99 million vaccinated people over 8 countries, and it's the largest COVID vaccine study that has come out to date. And so here are some of the key facts from this article, and they're all listed out here. So there's rare cases of myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart, as we all know. And they were identified in first, second, and third doses of the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna's mRNA vaccines. The highest rate of this issue was seen after the second Moderna dose of the vaccine, which this study is published in the journal Vaccine. So another heart condition called pericarditis actually had a 6.9-fold increased risk in those who took a third dose of AstraZeneca's viral vector vaccine. The first and fourth dose of Moderna's vaccine had a 1.7 and 2.6-fold increased risk, respectively, for pericarditis. There was a 2.5 times greater risk of developing a rare autoimmune disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome, or Barr syndrome, possibly, among those who took AstraZeneca's vaccine, compared to the rate of researchers expected, and 3.2 times greater risk of getting blood clots in that same population. And there was 3.8 times greater risk of developing a neurological disorder, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. That's a mouthful for sure. I'm not even sure what that means. That's definitely a lot of medical jargon that I have never heard before, but it can't be good. It's a neurological disorder, and that was after the Moderna vaccine was administered, and a 2.2-fold increased risk after AstraZeneca's vaccine, according to this study. So this article likes to point out a few things. So a big number is 13.5 billion. That's how many COVID vaccines have been administered worldwide since the start of COVID. And according to science research, Our World in Data, about 71% of the world's population has received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine. So, kind of extrapolating this out, there's over 6 billion people on Earth, and about 71% of those have received at least one dose. The 99 million people that they did this research on, that could be extrapolated out pretty largely, in my opinion. As we know, there have been some issues with the COVID vaccine. I personally have had one COVID vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson, which, interestingly enough, is not listed anywhere on this article. Obviously, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was pulled relatively early on for blood clotting issues, but it's interesting to note that they left the Johnson & Johnson vaccine outside of this. So it's interesting look from Forbes for them to kind of put this article up here. Um, they're kind of talking about an uptick in cases during fall and winter months for the variant JN.1, which, to be quite honest, was not even aware that JN.1 was a new COVID variant because I think we're all fucking done with it. And that's just how it goes. Welcome to the Elemoncenary Moment, Aaron Spears. I have been ranting about a article in Forbes that is disparaging COVID vaccines and showing pretty marked increases in myocarditis, uh, an autoimmune disorder called Guillain-Barre syndrome, and a neurological disorder as well. And it's just interesting to note all of these things in this Forbes article.
I would like to apologize to you on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation.
Why is that?
Because it was pushing an update, and I don't know why, but it said clearing data 100% complete for about 20 minutes.
You should get a Mac.
And,
uh,
and I just want to point out that the whole time I'm trying to get this whole thing fucking squared away, I'm getting R-worded memes from you, and it's pissing me off the whole time. So anyway,
Aaron was pushing me to start the podcast without him. I did mention that at the beginning.
I wasn't pushing you to do anything.
You said you could start it without me. We have a studio for a reason. So I went ahead and did that. We're only 7 minutes in now, but I already talked about the fun thing. I already went full COVID, get us thrown off fucking YouTube. So
no, what's funny is we're actually beyond the point where you get kicked off of stuff for that. I think we're like past that. I think now you're like okay to talk about the things that you weren't supposed to talk about.
No, then maybe I should start talking about other things that we're not supposed to talk about so that we can get kicked off YouTube.
Well, now that Shane Gillis hosted SNL, which I didn't actually watch any of that, so I don't know if it went well or not. I hope he like torched those dumbasses in the monologue though. But look at all these things where like him and all these other comedians and people who can say things you're not supposed to say. I know Roland Fryer was recently on Honestly with Barry Weiss, the podcast. She was interviewing him at the University of Austin's like meet and greet for the new students for their first year. He was the guy who was the academic, the economic guy who was researching police shooting data. And Claudine Gay was the one who I think led the assault. Well, I don't know what you call it, getting him discredited and like off the payroll for 2 years because of an allegation of assault or some sort of allegation because of the research he was doing. Right. So he's like sort of uncanceled now, and that's an example of that. So
well,
I think you can.
Shane Gillis, like pretty much uncanceled, and he uncanceled Bud Light. Like, so Shane Gillis is actually sponsored by Bud Light now. I don't know if you know that. He was sharing pictures of him getting to like do something with brewing Bud Light or whatever. So he like is single-handedly bringing Bud Light back to the forefront, I guess. And
not that I want to plug other pods, but the Roland Fryer episode is really interesting.
Remember, it's only news if you heard it here.
That guy is pretty smart, but he was kind of like he was pretty jovial about the whole thing. But he researched a lot of data into police shootings, and they did not like the outcome of that data. And he tells you exactly why, but I think you probably would know already.
Yeah, I do, but I'd like to look that up. Probably, maybe talk about that on another podcast. I think that's interesting.
It's one of those things where you weren't even allowed to talk about it. He talked to a lot of people who were like, I don't know if you should publish that. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm here to talk about it. he talks about his family too. Like he comes from a family of drug dealers who were all like in prison when he was a kid, and they're all dead now. And he goes into all that. But yeah, Shane Gillis also, success story. So anyway, and COVID.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that this article was interesting, and I just popped up um, pretty much my news feed here on Apple News, and uh, one of the things that I see on here, you and I kind of talk about. I did send a meme about this, but the U.S. has proposed a UN resolution calling for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza. They basically do not want this Rafah ground offensive to take place on Israel's part. So they now are starting to ask the UN Security Council to give a temporary ceasefire.
Okay, so they want two things. They want none of the hostages, including American hostages, to be rescued, and they don't want Hamas to be eliminated. That's what that means.
Sure, that's an interpretation. Um, what's the benefit, in your opinion, of Hamas not being eliminated for U.S. purposes?
No more dead Jews.
Because, in my opinion, um, it's it's actually really Israel who would probably not want this offensive to go on, because Netanyahu is basically saying, "Well, we'll have elections, but like after the war is over." So he has every reason to keep just pushing further and further in and continuing the war. Wouldn't you agree?
He does have that. Yeah, that is something that he would want as well.
He has
But
like the lowest approval rating of any president ever.
yeah, but the Israeli people are also like they both have they both want him out of office and they want Hamas eliminated. And so I don't know. I guess it's like if you ask them like which one do you want more, I don't know if they've actually asked that of those people.
Sure, they can have both.
I
You can have
I would like
elections, and
both
then
too.
the next prime minister can go ahead and continue the war. I mean,
Well, that's not. I mean, I'm only talking about it from like an American Gentile point of view, which is like eliminate the enemy. You have to eliminate them. You cannot give Hamas a win. Anything is a win. A ceasefire is a win. Letting them keep the hostages is a win. Letting them have a state is a win. Letting the UN pass a resolution is a win. All of this stuff, you know what I mean?
yeah, but you kind of admit to it that we pretty much are the UN, we are NATO, like we are these things because everybody kind of falls in step with the US policy. I find it interesting that obviously I think it was last week we saw or maybe the week before, where the ICJ or whatever. I think, yeah, it's one of the, it's either ICJ or IJC, comes out and says it's plausible that they're committing a genocide, and then they're supposed to be doing this huge push into I guess a large city, I guess, right, in Gaza. Rafah is like considered a larger city, maybe.
Well, Rafah is the
Um,
last stronghold of the Hamas leadership.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And now they're calling kind of for this like ceasefire, because I'm sure there's a ton of civilians there. Um, I
So
don't
there's
think
this.
that's coincidental.
So what happened was they when Israel went in, they split the country, the Gaza Strip. I say country. That was a Freudian slip, I guess. When they split the Gaza Strip into two, they went into the north first, and they told all the civilians to go to the south. And then they had all the operations in the north, which is where the Al Shifa hospital was. And that was the sort of what they thought was the nerve center of the whole operation. And perhaps it was, but they pulled out. And that's what the purpose of the tunnels were, was to, if they went north and they could move south. And so that's probably what Hamas leadership did, is they took the hostages and all the equipment and all the everything, and they moved south. And Rafah is um, there's a crossing there called the Philadelphia crossing, I think, and it's sort of the it's like a corridor between Egypt and Gaza, and there is an underground tunnel network there as well, and that's where they smuggle weapons and materials like concrete and shit through the border there. And the ideally the last the if you took over Rafah, if you took out Hamas and Rafah, you would control that Philadelphia corridor as well, and then that's where you would close off that last portion of Hamas control. And that's why Hamas, I don't think, wants that to happen, and that's why it would benefit them to keep Rafah. Does that make
See,
sense?
yeah, but I have to push back here a little bit. I think the assumption that Rafah is like the last bastion for Hamas is, I think, short-sighted. You and I have
In
talked.
Gaza, I don't
You
mean
and
in
I have talked
general.
before, yeah, but I mean, you and I have talked before about um, them kind of being able to get away with tunnels into Egypt, or, you know, I guess I guess that's it, right? So that'd be the only place they could really go. Um, and you were like, they don't have tunnels under there, but they didn't know they had tunnels all like under fucking Gaza, so they could very well have tunnels like under there to escape. Um, but sure, I mean, there's definitely Hamas people that will die in Rafah, but is it the last bastion? I don't know.
Well,
I would
there's the Hamas
imagine that
leadership in
a
Qatar.
lot have fled. Right, but I would imagine that they have some kind of force there, but they know they can't win this. And that's not what terrorist organizations do. So
They
like
don't want to win.
they'll probably pull back.
They're terrorists. They don't want to win. They want to. It's all about dying. It's all about killing Jews. I mean,
Oh,
I,
sure, but the more that they hold control over
that's
Gaza,
a
the more
win.
people they can, yeah, the more people they can recruit. So,
I just the way the media is sort of accepted that, like that last they the IDF got two hostages out, and they were like, the IDF did this operation. I don't know if we talked about it on our last podcast, but the media framed it like, oh, the IDF committed yet another crime, and it was like, oh no, the truth was that they got two hostages out, but there were stories that were just like didn't even mention that. It was like, oh, they just did another horrible thing. And if I was Israel, I would ignore all of this. Not that the UN actually has control over all this, because they don't. In fact, the UN actually IDF just released footage of more UN employees on October 7th across the border taking Israeli civilian bodies in the back of ambulances back across the border. I mean, there's more UN employees now than we've ever known before on video. And so it's like, yeah, who cares about what the UN thinks at this point? I would just finish the operation. If I was Israel, I would just finish it. I would ignore
I
it.
mean, you've already gone this far. There's no sense in you pulling back and not like just continuing on with what you're doing. I mean, you have support generally from the US. I mean, we just passed another aid package that split money between Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel, so they're getting funding. I mean, they're just going to keep pushing through, and they're going to
I
keep
mean,
getting
it's not really
funding.
even.
It doesn't matter if the US says, okay, well, you should stop this offensive in Rafah. They're still going to give them money. I mean, they already did.
It's not really giving them money. Like with the Taiwan situation, Taiwan's already bought those weapons. We're giving money to our defense contractors to manufacture weapons so that they can go to those people
Uh,
that.
Hold on, I have to push back there because you said the same fucking thing about Ukraine, and I told you that's not true. 41% of the money we're spending over there goes towards actually funding their government and their pensions and their
um
economy. We talked about this.
I
We
saw a
did.
number that was 90%, fairly
No.
recently,
Uh
actually, from
no.
National Review, in fact.
I cited those numbers a while ago. I mean, maybe new aid. I mean, there's been, since we talked about this, there's been multiple aid packages to Ukraine. So maybe, but at that time,
Well, I'm
we
talking about Taiwan now.
41%. No, I'm talking about Ukraine. Like you said the same
Well,
thing
it
about
feels like you're always
Ukraine.
talking about Ukraine when we talk about money, and it's like I mean, it always goes back to that, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because if you look at things here, we're not really spending money on securing our border, but we're spending money securing the borders of three different fucking countries.
I'm not the fucking
So yeah,
president. What do you want
it
me to do
definitely
about
goes back
it?
to that. Well, Congress appropriates the money. It's not entirely Biden's fault. Congress appropriates the money.
Oh,
So
it is entirely Biden's fault.
I mean,
I
everything
believe.
can get pinned on him, which is great.
I would like to pin it on him. I don't know. These people suck, man.
they all fucking suck. And here we are in 2024. We're gonna get the same shitty fucking election that we had
We're
4 years
trapped.
ago, and nothing's gonna change. I mean, the only thing would be Donald Trump wins again, and a lot of people will be really sad, and that'll make me really happy because I think it's funny. But I don't think it's a good thing for the country. I don't think it's a good thing if Biden wins.
I saw him today walking across the White House lawn, and he like, you see the way he walks now? He's like,
Dude, he walks like he's carrying two briefcases.
right.
It's just like this, like
that. It's like it's a shuffle.
Yeah, he has like a very pointed like thing. He looks like a marionette basically, which as we all know, the CIA flies invisible drones over him with strings on them and they control him that way.
Yeah, like a puppet.
Yeah, we know that.
Like a global puppet.
Yeah, it's a fact.
You know, I was I feel like I'm going crazy sometimes too, because like we're all like freaking out about the aid packages, right? We're like, man, they can't pass the aid packages. I'm like, why don't the Democrats vote for the aid packages too? Like, you could have like almost like 90% of the House could vote for these things and get them passed, and they don't. Like it's like the Republicans have to do it all, and I'm like, why is it that narrow? I'm like,
well, the sad thing is I'm actually seeing from Democrats, which is one thing I agree with, is conditioning aid at the very least.
well, Republicans conditioned it
these
too.
countries, right? Like, and sure, vote for that, but like, there's obviously different conditions from the Democrats that there are from the Republicans. I would highly doubt that any of those conditions are audit and find out where the fuck the money goes. I'm sure that's not one of the conditions.
They don't want you to audit it.
But I mean, I know something like 80% of Democrats, Nina Turner and all the fucking squad folks, like, kind of talk about this. Like, 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire in Gaza, something like that.
That yeah, and I'm sure like I'm sure that Republicans would say, well, we'll go for that if you just call the Ukraine thing off, you know, like these are things where like you can't. It's so weird. The whole Russia thing, like the Tucker Carlson thing is a perfect example. Or like Tucker Carlson goes, I can't believe that the shopping carts in this store are locked up, and I can't believe how far my money goes in Russia. Look how nice the subways are. Like he's really surprised about all this, which is absurd. And I'm like, wow, conservatives really like they were like Russia's pretty great, man. There's no homeless people. Not it's not true, by the way, but he's like, man, Moscow seems great. Yeah, they
or
probably
put them in gulags.
I mean, yeah, the conservatives are like, I shouldn't call them conservatives because they're not conserving anything, but they're like, wow, they're great over there. And then on the left, they're like, they like other bad actors in the world, like I don't know who. Pick your poison, maybe Iran, and it's like, man, these people are out of their goddamn minds. Where they're like, okay, we'll give you Gaza, but you got to give us Ukraine. You know, it's like, why are you guys always letting the bad guys win? What's wrong with you people?
I don't know, man. The whole thing's like pretty weird. Like, they're saying, like, they're arguing who to give this money to, and like like we were talking about, the border is still like crazy, and it has dropped off a little bit, like, but that's because Texas is securing their own border at this point.
It is crazy,
and
dude.
Apparently, Matt Gaetz put together some like resolution called the like protect your like right to self-defense or something act, to basically say that all of these states have the right to secure their own border without federal like protection. So they could essentially do what Texas is doing and bring in their like National Guard and close their borders too, because it's not just Texas that obviously borders Mexico. It's like Arizona and California and shit like that. But
Uh, well, there was also a Pew Research poll that came out recently that was like, I don't think you'll find a poll that's more positive for an issue, but I guess over 79% of Democrats and Republicans agree that aid should go to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, which I thought was interesting. And even for Republicans, the lowest number for aid to Ukraine was 79%, I think, in favor of. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, it's actually like a really, most Americans are like, yeah, let's do it. And everybody in the House is like, nope. And it's really bizarre. We're in like really weird times.
Oh, definitely, because I mean, you have conservatives like obviously talking about Nikki Haley being one of them, saying like we're not going to touch your Social Security, but we have to like increase the age of retirement, you know, based off life expectancy, even though life expectancy has actually, I believe, gone down in the United States
It has.
over the last like few years, but you still want to increase, uh, you know, the age for retirement and Social Security. Um, you know, they're all about spending all of this like money in foreign countries, but you know, they shut down any deal with the border because they want to make it a fucking political issue. So instead of actually just like helping with the problem, it just becomes this like huge nothing burger. Like they don't do anything except send fucking money to foreign countries.
But the
Like we
money
don't
they send to
actually
those,
govern the United States anymore.
okay, with the caveat that you're going to like bitch and moan if I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. A lot of the money that we're spending overseas isn't going over there. We're
You
spending it
keep fucking saying
here
that. That's not true.
anyway.
You keep saying that,
But
and that's not true. We talked about that.
but
It's not
also,
true.
we have a problem here with spending. And recently, I looked and it's
Hundred
something
percent
like 31% of federal spending was covered by the taxes of the 1%, which is the most that's been paid since like 79. And I thought that was really interesting because like they're always talking about the 1% don't pay their fair share, which I've always disagreed with because I'm like, what is the
agreed.
fair share? But anyway, I thought
They pay
it's
like
like, okay,
40% of all taxes.
yeah,
Like the
it,
1%, they pay like 40% of all taxes. And why is that not
yeah.
enough? Because there's only 1% of them. Like, what
So
about the
like,
other
what?
99%?
Yeah, so like, like when I like, okay, you have all this foreign spending, and it's like, it's not, it's a lot, but like the entitlement spending is most of it. And I don't know what you do to get that back into control. And the conservatives are actually like legitimately wise to point out, they used to be at least, they're wise to point out that that you have to get this shit under control. But now they've even agreed that we're not going to cut it anymore. That's actually the platform of both parties. And even recently, Biden was like, "Oh, the GOP wants to cut your Social Security," and it's like, "Well, no, that's not true anymore. That's actually a lie now." And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, you can't even use that against them. Everybody wants to spin into oblivion. We're just going to
Yeah,
go off
well,
this cliff. And Nikki Haley's a bad person to even communicate this because she's like, you
oh
know,
yeah, she sucks.
she's like, you're going to lower the retirement age, and then what? What does that mean?
And she's already said, she's like, it's basically going to be me or Kamala Harris. Like, I don't know where she's
She's
getting that from, but
it's delusions of grandeur. I mean, Kamala Harris is in the office. You have to get elected first.
right. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of like it's weird, it's ugly. Like politics, as we know, is just ugly right now. But I don't feel like we're doing anything at home to like make people's lives better. But then you see Democrats coming out and be like, "Well, Biden's done this," and the only thing positive that I've seen that he's done, that he has committed to doing, is forgiving some student loan debt. He's not doing it the way that he tried to do it before. He's finding other loopholes to allow people to have their debt forgiven, and so good on him for that. He's making
No,
it.
I
He's
disagree with
making it
you.
another. He actually committed to a promise, and kept that promise. Good on
Ugh.
him, because most politicians don't do that, as we know. So I gotta give him credit for that. Mine were not forgiven. Mine will never get forgiven. I'm sure of that. But he campaigned on it, and he's doing it, and he's also going to campaign on it again.
He
I know
campaigned on breaking the law.
He's revving up to do it again.
Man, I gotta just say that I'm surprised to hear you say that, to be honest. But I don't know.
Only in the sense, and again, I don't agree with it. If you take out a debt, you pay that back. But he campaigned on it and is doing what he can to like actually make that succeed. It's the only credit I would actually probably give him.
Brad, that's a real low bar, though.
Well.
You're better than that, dude. Like these guys campaign on everything. They lie through their fucking teeth. Just because he didn't fulfill a promise. What he did was he said, "I'm going to do something unconstitutional," and then the Supreme Court said, "No, you can't do that." And then he said, "Well, I'll figure out some other means." And then he went through.
We talked about this. He went the wrong way about it. He has multiple avenues to try and get it approved, and he took
I think he should have been impeached.
He took the one he knew he couldn't do. And now we know that he's definitely not getting fucking impeached at all, because the one informant that spoke to the FBI about his collusion with Ukraine or whatever was just arrested for falsifying statements to the FBI. So that whole fucking thing is going to be a sham. It's not going anywhere.
He could be impeached for farting in the Oval Office. I mean, he could be impeached for anything. It doesn't mean he's going to be removed. But do you want to talk about that for a minute? Do you want to the Robert Hur report at all? I mean, I think it's still an ongoing story, because the report was like, man, this guy is we can't charge him with anything because he's too old. He doesn't have a memory. And then everybody was like,
I think we did touch on that on the last podcast.
Oh, let's not talk about that, because nothing's really changed yet. But I think he's going to go to Congress next week to chat about it on the record.
Oh, really?
I think so.
I mean, I hope so. I want him to go. I mean, he's already on the record because it was obviously put in articles with his name attached to it. So it's definitely on the record.
I think there's going to be a hearing.
Yeah, I want him on that. And I want him to say in front of Congress that, Biden's memory is dog shit. But you know what? They want that too. So it might be their opportunity to, invoke the 25th Amendment or whatever to try and remove him. They want that. And then
it's so hard to do.
Then they're gonna have the lizard man fucking Gavin Newsom, come in.
Well, he might get pushed out by the media. I don't know. I mean, there's all these articles this week. I guess it's finally okay to say it out loud. Although it's probably too late, but I don't know. If you follow these media types online, the people who are the people that the Democratic Party actually listens to, they're coming out and saying now well, it seems kind of bad now. Seems like this guy's not up to the job, huh? Everybody else is like, what?
But I think they've been waiting for the right time to do it. Like I said, they've been basically giving Newsom an opportunity to roll back some of the shit he did, so he looks more like a centrist, and then just give him the reins. And we don't want lizard people in the White House, so hopefully he's done.
Gavin Newsom could probably beat Trump.
Oh,
he could
God!
Probably do it.
That might be worse than Biden beat Trump, to be honest. Gavin Newsom steamrolling Donald Trump.
I mean, if you haven't listened to Gavin Newsom talk,
oh, he is good. He's good in the room.
He's such a shitty
politically.
He's just a shitbag, dude.
Dude, he's definitely a shitbag. When he was on Bill Maher, I was watching it. I was like, this guy's a fucking asshole.
He's such a snake.
Fucking asshole. He's definitely a snake, dude.
When I think about a scumbag politician who's real good at being a politician, he's what comes to mind.
Oh yeah, just when he smiles, I'm yeah, he's fucking reptile, dude. Ugh.
Yeah, he's a good politician. That's not a compliment.
Yeah, no, that's not a compliment, especially in this house. That is not a
Uh,
compliment. That's one thing you don't want to be. That's why I like Thomas Massey so much. He's not
well,
a good
Thomas
politician.
Massey, man, I kind of like him too, but even he's kind of getting on my nerves lately.
Yeah, he's been taking a shit lately for sure.
These guys, a lot of these guys have there are people who don't have principles, and then there are people who have the principles and then they adhere to them to the bitter end, no matter what, even if it's like absolutely the wrong thing to do. And Thomas Massey is definitely one of those people. I guess that's what the voters want in his district. I think tonight's the South Carolina primary, or maybe tomorrow.
Ooh,
I think Nikki Haley's going to get slaughtered in that
I
one.
fucking hope she loses her own primary. That's gonna be great. Because then
Well,
she has no choice but to just drop out.
she's not going to drop out. I know that. I think we both know that. Why would she?
Well, no, I mean, she should, but at the same time, she won't because she's just waiting for something to happen with Trump. And as we know, he just got two verdicts against him, one from that
Oh,
Jean Carroll or whatever for like 80 some million, and then now what, $324 million like judgment against him that he's gonna have to pay. So
I think it was a little more. So
was it?
let's
I thought it was like it might have been like 346, something like that. But
yeah, maybe that. Let's chitty chat a little about that. Okay, so the Eugene Carroll one, he pays that for sure. I don't think you can appeal it. So he's like broke on that one. And then
but here's I don't think that those things have to get paid all at once, right?
I don't know.
Because I could see a world where he makes it into office and he vacates basically those judgments against him. Like,
I guess you could vacate this mortal coil without ever paying them. I don't put it on a payment plan.
I don't know. I mean, he did say he was worth like $6 billion. He could just go get that money that Jared Kushner got from Saudi Arabia. And he could pay that lickety split.
I will say that the other one, the big one, I think he could appeal that one. The thing about that case is it's not a legitimate ruling because he's like the first person in history to be charged with that, which is like, oh, he kind of just like lied about how much his property was worth, which everybody does, and then he got a loan and then he paid it back and everybody was happy, and that's that. But he's like the first person to ever be charged for
But
it.
not to mention that I texted you this the other day. Another property near Mar-a-Lago went up for sale for like $289 million, and Mar-a-Lago is like bigger and everything else, and has like businesses run out of it, and they're trying to say it was only worth 18 million when another house that's lesser than Mar-a-Lago went for 289 million. Like, who's in control of that? It's this fucking judge. He's not a fucking real estate expert.
He's a judge in New York,
Right.
isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, he's not even in the state. Yeah, it's weird, dude.
But
I
it's
don't.
so weird that like those judgments are going against him, but then like Georgia, obviously which is like the toughest one that he should really face, and Fani Willis just goes and fucks it up by hiring like her fuckboy.
Can we talk about that, please?
Oh,
Did you
that's
watch
why
any
I'm
of the
bringing it
clips?
up. No, I haven't yet.
I
I
watched
have
them.
to. But she's like, I'm not on trial. And it's like, you are now, bitch. This is what happens when you fuck around.
I watched these clips because I watched the first one, and then I kind of got hooked because she was like, she's in the courtroom, and she kind of Leroy Jenkins it because she's in the front, and then they're kind of like, well, you can take the stand if you want, but why don't you ask your counsel? And then she goes over to counsel, and they're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. And then she's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And then she goes up there, and I was like, okay, sweet. What is she going to say? And then she said some crazy shit. First, they're like, okay, well, you had cash, right? And she's like, yeah, I had cash. I'm like, always have cash. She's like, how much cash are we talking? She's like, well, I could have 100. I could have like 15,000. And I'm like, wait, what?
Who the
15,000?
fuck carries that much
Yeah,
cash?
I'm like, that's a lot of money. And then she's
How
like,
do you
well,
even get that? Do they make like
yeah.
$10,000 bills or like what?
All she did was say crazy shit you should never say. Like, okay, if somebody asked me, what do you do with
like $100K to a strip club?
Like, okay, you ask Aaron, like, what are you gonna do with $100 cash? I'm gonna go, well, I might tip somebody. No, what she does, she says, well, you know what I tell girls is, you always gotta have $100 cash because you never know if you're out with a man and you want to get a ride. And I'm like, bitch, shut the fuck up. Whatever you're saying, shut up. Don't finish that sentence. But she's like, okay. She's got advice for girls. She always says, carry a little $100 cash, and then it's like, okay, well, do you, what do you do with like, where do you do this money? She's like, well, I keep it at home. I keep it in the mattress. She's always got like, I've always had like, it's like, okay, well, how'd you pay the guy? And she's like, well, I paid him in cash. Well, how'd you rent these cabins? Well, we paid in cash. Okay, well, do you have any receipts? No, we don't have any receipts. Well, how'd you get the money? Well, it's cash. How'd you get your money? And she's just like questioning the person asking the questions. And it's so like, at least all these other questions where it's like, well, where'd you get your money? It's just cash. I got my cash. Where'd you get your cash? And then the guy, he said, she asked him at one point, like, how'd you get the cabin? Well, I just rented the cabin. Okay, well, how many cabins do you rent? He's like, well, I don't know. I rent a lot of cabins. And it's like, well, what the fuck does that mean? What do you mean you rent a lot of cabins? And like, they just said crazy shit. And by the end of it, I was just kind of like blown away by the corruption. Like, how does somebody get to that position and pays everything with cash, no paper record or anything? And Papa got on the stand too, and Papa was interesting too. He was also like, yeah, I told her like you should always have cash. I mean, it was really interesting. It was really
That's so
bizarre.
weird. Dude, they are going to have to drop this case against Trump. They're going to have to. Like,
yes.
The prosecutor that you hired to go after him is your fuck boy. And you very clearly had like a quid pro quo with him over this whole Trump thing. They're going to have to drop the case. There's no way that they let this go on. Like, they can't. It's a sham. So yeah, sure, he loses his 2 like civil judgments or whatever, but there's no criminal intent there. Georgia was like a criminal trial, right? So now, like, clearly you picked the wrong motherfucker to try and actually like bring something against him. Like, could you not find another prosecutor? So you had to fucking bribe one and have like a relationship with one in order to prosecute it? Like, come on.
Well, and the MSNBC, the MSNBC people that were watching this were going like, yeah, Slay Queen. That's what they were doing. They were like, yeah, she's doing great, And it's like, no, yeah, Slay Queen. Like, what you want is a prosecutor who's going to like be cool and kind of be like, answer the questions and just be generally like consistent. You don't want
no
Slay Queen. No Slay Queen. And it's like, they were like out there. The MSNBC people were like, they were out of their minds. Like, no, she had $15,000 in cash laying around the house. Like, are you out of your goddamn mind? Nobody does that. Not a single sane person on this goddamn earth does that. That's crazy. And that's
come on, she does.
Like, how do you come across that much cash?
It's Fani Willis and every doomsday prepper out there that hold all their cash.
That was absurd. I couldn't believe that. And I just like that. It's an obvious sign of corruption because it's like, why do you have cash if you that much cash? Well, if you don't want people to find out where you and what you're doing, you don't leave a paper record. And then there were other things like, okay, well, where's Barbados? They asked him with this one, like, what country is Barbados? And she's like, I don't know where Barbados is. Well, I don't either. Okay, maybe it's in South America.
I definitely don't.
But I'm not a prosecutor charging the president with crimes. That's the difference. Is I'm not Fani Willis. I'm fucking dumb dipshit with a whatever. Right? I'm over here. She's the one who's over there, and she's just like, I don't know where the fuck it is. I pay with cash. Which, by the way, she paid with the trip with cash. I went to Barbados and I paid with cash. It's absurd, dude.
Yeah, I think they shot themselves in the foot with this one, especially since she went and decided to like testify against herself. Like, you're not supposed to be able to self-incriminate, right? But she definitely did.
And I got to tell you too, like, all this stuff is happening on the East Coast. I just got to say, like, West Coast be crazy, but like this shit is wild.
Yeah, it's getting
And this
pretty
is all
fucking wacky,
this is
man.
East Coast wacky shit for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. I mean, the West is wacky because there's so much like liberalism like on the West Coast and stuff, and but everybody drinks the Kool-Aid and everything else. Like Georgia is not exactly just a blue state. Like it's a pretty rural southern state. Like there's still Republicans there in the deep South, and I I don't know, man. This
It's
just
just
looks
like it's
bad.
Mar-a-Lago, it's New
It looks
York, it's
bad.
Georgia.
Yeah, like
They're going across the border to Tennessee for lunch. I'm like, why the fuck are you going over the border there? I know why I went over the border from Georgia and Tennessee because of tax reasons, but like, why are they doing it? They're prosecutors making a lot of money. Like, there's all this weird shit going on, all these different plot lines, and I'm just like, the fuck, man.
I'll be interested to see what happens when they just eventually have to drop this case. But they're going to keep it going as long as they can to try and keep him off the ballot, or at least keep people from voting for him. But it seems to be that every time something happens to Donald Trump, he gets more and more support. Like it doesn't ever wane. It's really weird.
Yeah, I guess this was the one case that had he been convicted, the public was polled and said that they would hold it against him, and they basically lit that one on fire. Okay, what else is going on?
Man, just looking at different things. This one, all this stuff is about like the economy, which, interestingly enough, going back to basically funding and spending money, um, in general, not specific to Ukraine, but in general, uh, economists are starting from like Citibank and stuff are really starting to say, oh, we're definitely seeing markers for a recession. And so we basically have a delayed recession from what we were looking at before. And, you and I have been, even with this like uptick, saying, no, we're due. Like there's going to be a big recession coming. And I think we're starting to see it. We saw a lot of tech layoffs just recently. And some of
Mm-hmm.
them are small, like Google laid off like 500 people, which in terms of working for Google, that's not a lot, but still layoffs. Seeing companies cut contractors and things like that. Um, so maybe the economy is finally catching up to where you and I believe it actually is going.
Uh, yeah, maybe. I think I sent you something recently about how I think this is the highest or the most credit card debt that's been on record in a certain period of time. Maybe since like the financial crisis. I don't know if that's I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly, but to me that's a perfect indicator if people are putting their purchases on credit cards. Um, and that's something that's happening too. So auto loans, I think that's another thing where I think auto loans are being people are late on their payments more than ever before, delinquent. So yeah, I don't know if it's going to be like a full blown recession or not. I don't know. I think
We
maybe it's
talked about
possible.
like all these bubbles popping, and that
The auto was the one. Yeah.
there are plenty, student loan payments have kicked back in. I don't know if people are aware, like they actually got deferred like another couple of months because they were having trouble processing payments and stuff. So they ended up giving everybody till I think like February, and like so it just started back this month to be paying back student loan debt. So I'm sure in a couple of months we're going to start seeing delinquent payments and stuff there. And then they're probably going to have to do something again with the election coming up, to maybe suspend payments again because, people can't pay them. Who knows? Like they're going to find some fucking reason to do something just to get a win for Biden, in my opinion. Um, so I don't know, man. I don't know. Economy's looking rough and everything else, but one thing we didn't touch on. This is a actually big piece. Uh, Alexei Navalny died. So he
Yeah.
was transferred to basically a gulag in
Siberia.
Siberia or something, considered one of the worst prisons in the world, ultimately. And he was there, what, a week maybe, and now he turns up dead. I've seen different.
Brad's dog is barking.
Yeah, moron. So I've seen some things kind of going on about this situation, where like Russia is essentially like refusing to give his body back. Like the prison is refusing to give his body to the family. But that same article said something else, and then they changed the title of it to be that Russia's refusing to do it, or that the prison is refusing to do it, and that wasn't. It might not actually be the case.
Well, it wasn't surprising. I could say that Alex Navalny is that guy had some serious balls because he survived an assassination attempt and he was out of the country. He got treatment in I think Germany, and he knew when he went back to Russia that he was going to be arrested and that this was going to be the conclusion.
And he'd been
And he
in
went
prison
back.
for a couple of years.
Yeah, and he went back, and they did it. That's what happened, and that's exactly what happens in Russia, and that it happened a few days after Tucker Carlson beclowned himself in front of the entire world, in front of Vladimir Putin. You know, Putin's laughing at him, and then 2 days later, you know, Navalny ends up dead, and he's like,
Putin told him, he was like, "It's a good thing that you never got into the CIA. They're a serious organization."
yeah, to his
He's
fucking
he
face.
clowned the shit out of him.
And
Oh,
Tucker Carlson, man, he's like you could see in his face that he's actually kind of like afraid of Putin. You know, like this guy is like he might kill me. And you know, of course, the subways are great. And Navalny, you know, Tucker Carlson was at a summit the next day, I think, and he said on the stage that sometimes you have to kill people. And wouldn't you know it? Wouldn't you know the bad luck that sometimes if you side with a dictator like that, the dictator actually does have to kill somebody, and it turns out it was a guy who was, you know,
I mean,
just political opposition.
didn't Donald Trump also say that? Like sometimes you have to just kill people.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
not a great thing to say.
he wanted to kill the WikiLeaks guy. What's his name?
Julian Assange.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he wanted to assassinate him.
yeah, it's crazy, man. So like, do not be on the side of a dictator, and then you never have to deal with the consequences like this. And so, yeah, Alexei Navalny dies in prison, and the Russians have done this to people for years. They killed a guy with an umbrella that had a poison tip in London or whatever. They've killed people going back. They killed Trotsky with an ice pick in fucking South America when he was dating the Frida Pinto or whatever. Like the Russians have a long storied history of killing their political opposition,
Oh, I
and
mean, how
so
many oligarchs have accidentally fallen out of windows ever since
yeah,
the Ukrainian invasion? Like anyone that speaks out against Putin, like, oh, out a window.
Prigozhin's plane fell out of the sky just a couple months ago. So it's sad news. I mean, it's unfortunate, and his wife wants the body back, and I
Well, she also
don't know
said
that you'll get it.
she's going to take up, uh, basically being against Putin. And it's like, well, that's a one way ticket to fucking hell if you ask me. Like that's just
Yeah,
putting.
maybe she's a threat, maybe she's not. I don't know, but you know, this guy can pretty much get you anywhere in the world. Maybe not in America, but he can pretty much get you anywhere else. And
Oh, most definitely. He's old
yeah,
KGB, man. They don't fuck around.
yeah. And every single politician in America, every president has fallen for this shit since Bill Clinton. You know, like George W. Bush said, like I looked into his like Christian soul, and like Obama was the reset button guy, and Trump was like, you know, I sat across the table from him and he seemed okay. And Biden was like, if Navalny ever gets killed, he's gonna feel the consequences, you know. And it's like,
Yeah,
well,
he's
where's the
radio
consequences?
silent about it now.
Right. He's just words, you know? These guys all have words for him. That's it. Putin will get away with everything he wants to get away with. And that's really depressing. And that's my thoughts on it. What are yours?
I mean, I think we all saw this coming, especially when they were moving him into that prison. It's it was not even a question that he was gonna get killed, in my opinion. It was just a matter of time. I can't believe they did it a week later. Like they didn't even give it like a month. Um, because he had been in contact with his like lawyers or something who were saying, "Oh, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine," and then he goes there, and within a week, he's dead. Um,
Well, their cause of death they gave was like he suffered death effects. I mean, that's what like it's
what
like literally like
does that
yeah, that's
mean?
this yeah, it's like man, he just like he was like under he had like some death circumstances.
Poison also causes death effects.
Yeah,
Again,
it's I mean, really like they're sliding back into Soviet Union if they hadn't already been doing that for like a decade, and I don't know where that stops, dude. I mean, Putin might live to be 100 years old. I don't know. It's hard to say, but the Soviet Union was not a pleasant place, and we have all those documents now. We know exactly what happened, and people have a real serious lack of interest in what that was fucking like, and people don't have any interest in what the Cold War was
well,
like.
no,
And
communism killed like 26 million people, more than Hitler,
it was
and
100 million.
here people are like, oh well, yeah, if you include Mao and
People
everything
people
in
should
it, but
seriously go back and look and learn, and they won't.
right, because now people are Marxists and they want to be fucking communists, and it's like we kind of did this back in what, like the 60s or some shit like that. Maybe it was the 80s, like where it's like that show The Americans, like people spies in different countries, which definitely still happens today. There are
Yeah,
Russian
because
spies here, I guarantee it.
oh, there we have spies in Russia. How else did we figure out about that Russian satellite nuclear whatever
Right,
program? You know, like
100%.
yeah, I mean they haven't deployed it, but for our listeners who are here or whatever, you know, there's a Russian capability where apparently they can destroy a satellite using a nuclear based weapon. But you know, what does that mean? I don't know. The Russians are stupid enough that they might go into low Earth orbit and use a nuke to destroy a satellite and then cause all this debris. Have you ever seen the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock?
Oh yeah, that was a good
Yeah,
movie.
I mean, what, the Russians are going to cause this problem for everybody. We're like, they're just going to blow up shit over the lower atmosphere, and then we're never going to get off this planet because all these little bullet-sized debris things are going to be flying at the speed of sound around the atmosphere, and we're just stuck here forever. Ugh,
Bleak. It's
that's what I
looking
bring to
bleak,
the
people.
table.
I think
Um,
that's a good place to end.
yeah, you think so?
It's so bleak. No,
Before we go,
yeah, I've been playing Resident Evil 4,
oh
which
yeah,
I have never played before, and it's quite good. I thought Resident Evil 5 was where they went to like the snakehead, like wiggly zombie things, because they're not even
hmm
zombies anymore, they're just like angry villagers. I thought that was RE5, but I had never played Resident Evil 4 because I didn't have a GameCube. So now I'm getting to play it, and it's pretty good.
uh, it's considered one of the greatest action games ever made, and I think that still holds true. It was my game of the year last year. I've been playing. I can't. Actually, I've been playing all kinds of stuff. We don't need to go into it. Before we go, I just finished. I watched 3A24 movies over the weekend. One was The Iron Claw, which I think is like a 5 stars, thumbs up, great movie. Don't need to talk about that
It was a
one
little
because I
long.
think
It
you're
drug
right.
on. It drug on at the end.
I did pause it in the middle and I thought, oh shit, there's still a lot more.
Oh fuck
I
yeah,
watched.
dude! I paused in the middle to go to the bathroom. I was like, "Oh, there's
Yeah,
still an hour." I was like,
yeah. I was like, what?
"We're going balls deep, I guess." And
Yeah.
yeah,
Priscilla was also good. I would say that's a three
it
and a half star
was.
movie, but I liked it. And then I watched Past Lives Today, which I think is Korean Richard Linklater. Richard Linklater, who did like Before Sunrise. It's
Yeah,
sort of like Before Sunrise. Uh, a good movie, a 5 star movie, maybe 4.5 stars. And I just thought it was really, it's pretty. depressing, and I don't know if I came out of it feeling great, but it was an interesting story about something called I think it's called, let me get the term right here. It's In Yun, which is about like fate, and the movie's about like past lives, which means like, was there two people in a past life and they were like lovers, and then in the current life they aren't meant to be, but there's still a connection there, and then they're still drawn to each other, but then it just doesn't happen anyway. And so it's like about these two kids who like, the boy liked the girl, but she ends up like going to America. They find each other later on. They talk, it doesn't work out. Then they kind of become adults or whatever, and you just kind of follow them through their lives. And then he eventually like meets her and her husband, and you're just kind of like figuring out like that he's kind of like the lost soul, and maybe in their next life they'll like fall back in love. And but it's not a happy ending, but it's sort of like maybe there's another happy ending in another life. So
Interesting. I'll have to check that one
yeah.
out. I like a lot of A24 movies, so I'm going to have to get into that one.
It's as good as any other one.
Nice. Well, thanks for joining me today on this here episode of the El Mercenary Moment.
I apologize for the delay.
The hell is that? Kale?
Seaweed.
Ew. What a horrible way to end a podcast, but I guess that's where we're going to end it. Fuck you
Good
and your
night.
seaweed. Good night.
Goodbye.